What happens when a fierce Apache chief, determined to protect his people, stumbles upon a white woman caring for the one person he loves most? This moment will change their lives in ways no one could have imagined. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dry plains of Arizona Territory in the summer of 1868. Chief Running Wolf of the Chiricahua Apache tribe rode his painted stallion across the dusty landscape, his weathered face marked with deep lines of worry. For 3 days now, his 7-year-old daughter, Little Fawn, had been burning with fever, her small body racked with coughs that seemed to tear at her chest. "Father, we must hurry," said Swift Arrow, his teenage son who rode beside him. "The medicine man says her spirit may leave soon if we cannot break the fever." Running Wolf nodded grimly. The tribe's medicine man had tried every traditional remedy, healing herbs, sacred prayers, and ceremonial rituals, but Little Fawn only grew weaker. Her illness had started after several white settlers had visited their camp to trade, bringing unknown diseases that the Apache had no defense against. "The white man's diseases are powerful enemies," Running Wolf said bitterly. "Our medicine is not strong enough." As they crested a small hill, they could see their encampment in the distance, the conical tips of the wickiups barely visible among the scrubby vegetation. Running Wolf's heart was heavy. Little Fawn was his youngest child, born to his second wife who had died during a raid by Mexican soldiers 2 winters ago. The little girl was precious to him, the last connection to his beloved wife. "Perhaps we should seek help from the white settlement," Swift Arrow suggested cautiously, knowing his father's pride and distrust of the white men. Running Wolf's jaw clenched. "They bring the sickness, and now you think they can cure it? I have heard that their medicine woman, the one they call Miss Sarah, has helped others. Even 2 Bears says his son was healed by her remedies." Running Wolf remained silent, torn between his distrust of whites and his desperate need to save his daughter. The whites had been encroaching on Apache lands for years, bringing conflict, disease, and death. Yet some, like this Miss Sarah, seemed different from the soldiers and the greedy settlers who took their land. When they reached the camp, Running Wolf's sister, Gray Dove, rushed to meet them, her face lined with concern. "Brother, come quickly. Little Fawn's fever grows worse." Running Wolf dismounted in a fluid motion and hurried to his wickiup. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of medicinal herbs and smoke from the small fire. Little Fawn lay on a bed of soft furs, her small frame shivering despite the heat. Her face was flushed with fever, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. The tribe's medicine man, Old Raven, sat beside her chanting softly. He looked up as Running Wolf entered, and the chief could see the defeat in the old man's eyes. "My medicine does not reach her, Chief," Old Raven said softly. "The white man's sickness is too strong. Her spirit fights, but her body weakens." Running Wolf knelt beside his daughter and placed a gentle hand on her forehead. The heat radiating from her skin shocked him. Little Fawn's eyes fluttered open, glazed with fever, but she managed a weak smile when she saw her father. "Father," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I saw Mother in my dreams. She was calling to me." Fear gripped Running Wolf's heart. If Little Fawn was seeing visions of her dead mother, her spirit was already preparing to leave this world. He looked at Old Raven, who shook his head solemnly. "There is nothing more I can do, Chief. The spirits are calling her." Running Wolf stood abruptly. "Then I will seek the white woman's medicine," he declared. "Swift Arrow, prepare the horses. We leave immediately." Gray Dove gasped. "Brother, you cannot trust the white people. They will capture you, or worse." "I will not sit and watch my daughter die," Running Wolf replied firmly. "If there is a chance this white healer can save her, I must try." Within moments they had wrapped Little Fawn in soft blankets. Running Wolf mounted his horse with the child cradled against his chest, her small body burning against his skin. Swift Arrow and 2 trusted warriors would accompany them for protection. As they rode toward the white settlement 10 miles away, Running Wolf's mind was in turmoil. He was risking not only his own life but potentially his tribe's safety by approaching the white settlement. But the alternative, watching his beloved daughter slip away, was unthinkable. "Hold on, Little Fawn," he whispered to the semi-conscious child in his arms. "Your father will find healing for you, even if I must enter the enemy's camp to do so." Sarah Matthews wiped perspiration from her brow as she tended her small garden behind the cabin. At 32, she had been living alone in the Arizona Territory for nearly 3 years, ever since her husband Thomas had been killed by outlaws on his way back from Tucson. The small settlement of Pinewood had become her home, though she kept mostly to herself, focusing on her work as a healer. "Miss Sarah!" a young voice called. Sarah straightened to see Billy Thompson, the blacksmith's 10-year-old son, running toward her. "Miss Sarah, come quick!" "What is it, Billy?" she asked, removing her gardening gloves. "Indians, ma'am, Apache warriors. They're at the edge of town with a sick child." Sarah's heart quickened. Relations with the local Apache tribes had been tense but peaceful for the past year. The presence of warriors in town could mean trouble, especially given the recent rumors of attacks on settlements further south. "Where's Sheriff Davis?" she asked, already moving toward her cabin to gather her medical supplies. "He's there with them, ma'am. He sent me to fetch you. Says one of them's a chief and he's got a real sick little girl. The chief asked for you special." Sarah paused, surprised. "For me? How would an Apache chief know of me?" "Don't know, ma'am, but he seems desperate. Sheriff's keeping folks calm, but people are mighty nervous." Sarah quickly collected her medicine bag, filled with both conventional remedies she'd brought from Boston and local herbal treatments she'd learned from a Mexican curandera who had passed through Pinewood last year. If an Apache child was ill enough for a chief to risk coming into a white settlement, the situation must be dire indeed. As she hurried through the dusty main street of Pinewood, she could see a small crowd gathered at the eastern edge of town. Sheriff Davis stood with his hand casually resting on his holstered gun, speaking to a tall, imposing Apache man who sat astride a magnificent paint horse. In the chief's arms was a small bundle, a child wrapped in blankets. 3 other Apache warriors sat on their horses behind the chief, their faces impassive but their eyes alert, scanning the growing crowd of townspeople. "Here's Miss Sarah now," Sheriff Davis said as she approached. The relief in his voice was palpable. The Apache chief turned to look at her, and Sarah was struck by the intensity of his gaze and the unmistakable fear and desperation in his eyes. Whatever differences existed between their peoples, the love of a father for his child transcended such boundaries. "I am Running Wolf of the Chiricahua," the chief said in surprisingly good English. "My daughter, Little Fawn, is very sick. I am told you have strong medicine, white woman." Sarah stepped closer, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. "May I see her?" she asked gently. Running Wolf hesitated, then carefully lowered the bundle. Sarah gasped softly when she saw the child's condition. The little girl, no more than 7 or 8 years old, was burning with fever. Her breathing was labored, and a quick examination revealed the telltale rash on her chest. "How long has she been ill?" Sarah asked, already reaching into her bag for willow bark to reduce the fever. 5 days, Running Wolf replied. "Our medicine man has tried all remedies, but the fever grows stronger. She cannot drink, cannot eat." Sarah nodded grimly. "It's measles, I believe. We've had several cases in town this past month." She looked up at the chief. "I can help her, but she needs care for several days. She's too weak to travel." Murmurs rippled through the crowd of settlers. Sheriff Davis stepped closer. "Miss Sarah, you suggesting these Apache stay in town?" "Not all of them," Sarah replied firmly. "But the child and perhaps her father should stay. I can treat her at my cabin." "That's not wise," the sheriff warned in a low voice. "Folks are on edge with the Apache this close to town." "Then they'll have to get over it," Sarah said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "This child will die without proper care, and I won't have that on my conscience." "Would you?" The sheriff sighed, knowing when he was beaten. He turned to Running Wolf. "Your warriors must return to your camp, but you and your daughter can stay with Miss Sarah until the child recovers." Running Wolf conferred briefly with his men in their native tongue. Swift Arrow, the youngest warrior, protested vehemently, but the chief silenced him with a sharp command. Finally, he turned back to Sarah and the sheriff. "I will stay with my daughter. My men will return to our camp, but will come each day to the edge of your settlement for news." Sarah nodded. "That's acceptable. Now please, let's get your daughter somewhere comfortable. She needs treatment immediately." As Running Wolf dismounted with Little Fawn in his arms, the crowd of settlers parted warily. Sarah led the way to her small cabin at the edge of town, acutely aware of the whispers and stares following them. "You're making a mistake, Sarah," called out Emmett Walsh, a rancher known for his particular hatred of Indians. "You let that savage into your home and you'll regret it." Sarah paused and turned to face him. "The only thing I would regret, Mr. Walsh, is allowing prejudice to prevent me from saving a child's life. Now, if you'll excuse us." Inside her cabin, Sarah quickly prepared her spare bed for little Fawn. Running Wolf gently laid his daughter down, his strong hands surprisingly tender as he brushed damp hair from her forehead. "I need to prepare medicines," Sarah explained, moving to her kitchen area. "First, we must lower her fever and help her breathe more easily. Then we can treat the rash and make sure she takes fluids." Running Wolf watched her intently as she worked, grinding herbs and heating water. "Why do you help us, white woman?" "Your people fear mine." Sarah paused in her work. "I'm a healer. I help those who need healing regardless of where they come from." She measured dried herbs into a small pot of water. "And I believe that kindness can bridge even the widest divides between peoples." The Apache chief studied her face, searching for deception but finding none. "My son, Swift Arrow, spoke of you. He said others from our tribe have been helped by your medicine." Sarah nodded as she strained the herbal tea into a cup. "Two bears brought his son to me last winter with a similar sickness. The boy recovered well." She handed the cup to Running Wolf. "We need to get her to drink this a little at a time. It will help with the fever." Together, they gently raised little Fawn's head, coaxing the sick child to sip the bitter tea. Some dribbled down her chin, but she managed to swallow most of it before falling back into a fitful sleep. "Now we wait," Sarah said softly, "and pray." Running Wolf nodded, settling himself on the floor beside his daughter's bed, his back straight and proud despite his obvious exhaustion. Sarah realized that he had likely been awake for days, watching over his sick child. "You should rest," she suggested. "I'll watch over her." The chief shook his head firmly. A father does not rest while his child suffers. In that moment, Sarah saw beyond the fearsome warrior to the loving father beneath, a man not so different from any white father she knew. She nodded in understanding, and quietly began preparing more medicines for the long night ahead. 3 days passed with little Fawn hovering between life and death. Sarah worked tirelessly, applying cool compresses to bring down the fever, administering herbal teas for strength, and gently coating the rash with a soothing salve. Running Wolf rarely left his daughter's side, speaking to her softly in Apache, telling her stories of brave warriors and clever animals to keep her spirit from wandering too far from her body. By the 4th morning, Sarah noticed a change. Little Fawn's fever had broken during the night, and her breathing, while still labored, had improved. The child's eyes, when they opened, were clearer, more present. "She is stronger today," Sarah told Running Wolf as she checked the little girl's pulse. "Her body is fighting back." Running Wolf nodded, the relief evident in his face, though his expression remained stoic. "Your medicine is strong, Sarah Matthews." It was the first time he had used her name, and Sarah felt an unexpected warmth at hearing it from his lips. Over the past days, a cautious respect had developed between them as they worked together to save little Fawn's life. Each day, Swift Arrow had come to the edge of town as promised, and Running Wolf had gone to speak with him briefly, always returning to Sarah's cabin without incident. The townspeople had gradually become accustomed to the presence of the Apache chief, though many still watched him warily when he passed. "I think she might be able to eat something today," Sarah said, moving to her small kitchen area. Some broth would give her strength. As she prepared a simple broth from dried meat and herbs, she watched Running Wolf from the corner of her eye. Despite his formidable presence, he showed surprising gentleness with his daughter. He sang to her in a low voice, songs that sounded ancient and powerful to Sarah's ears. She wondered what the words meant, but didn't want to intrude by asking. "The songs tell of our ancestors," Running Wolf said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. "They remind little Fawn that she comes from strong people who have faced many challenges and survived." Sarah smiled. "They're beautiful. I don't understand the words, but I can feel their meaning." Running Wolf studied her for a moment. "You are different from other white women I have seen." "How so?" Sarah asked, stirring the broth. "You live alone. You do not fear to speak your mind, and you were not afraid to bring an Apache warrior into your home." His dark eyes held hers. "Why?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. "My husband was killed 3 years ago. Since then, I've learned to rely on myself." She paused, thinking of the lonely nights and difficult days that had followed Thomas's death. As for not being afraid, I found that fear often prevents understanding, and understanding is the first step toward peace. Running Wolf nodded slowly. Wise words. My people have much fear of the white man's ways, just as your people fear Apache ways. Fear leads to hatred. Hatred leads to war. And innocent children suffer for it, Sarah added softly, looking at little Fawn. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Sarah opened it to find Sheriff Davis standing there, his expression grave. Morning, Miss Sarah. Need a word if you don't mind. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. What is it, Sheriff? Riders came in from Fort Grant last night. There have been Apache raids on settlements near the Dragoon Mountains. 3 families killed. His voice was low but tense. Folks in town are getting restless with your guest. Emmett Walsh has been stirring them up, saying we've got the enemy right here in our midst. Sarah felt a chill despite the morning heat. Running Wolf and his people haven't been involved in any raids. They're from much further north, and his daughter is still recovering. She can't be moved yet. The sheriff sighed, removing his hat to run a hand through his thinning hair. I know that, Sarah. But folks are scared, and scared people do foolish things. I'm just warning you to be careful. Thank you for the warning, she replied. But I won't send them away. The child needs at least another few days of care. After the sheriff left, Sarah returned inside, troubled by the news. Running Wolf looked up from his daughter's bedside, immediately sensing her disquiet. There is trouble, he stated rather than asked. Sarah hesitated, then decided honesty was best. There have been raids to the south. People in town are nervous. Running Wolf's expression darkened. Not my people. We have kept the peace as agreed in the last council. I believe you, Sarah assured him. But others might not make that distinction. A small voice interrupted their conversation. Father, I'm thirsty. Both adults turned immediately to little Fawn, who was awake and trying to sit up. Running Wolf gently supported her while Sarah quickly brought a cup of water. Slowly, Sarah advised as the little girl drank eagerly. That's it. Small sips. Little Fawn looked at Sarah with curious eyes. Are you a spirit woman? Father said your medicine is strong. Sarah smiled. No, just a regular woman who knows about healing plants and remedies. The child studied her with solemn eyes. Thank you for helping me, White Lady. My name is Sarah, she replied gently, and you're very welcome, Little Fawn. As the day progressed, Little Fawn continued to improve, managing to eat some broth and even sitting up for short periods. Running Wolf's relief was palpable, though he remained vigilant for any signs of the illness returning. That evening, as Sarah prepared a simple supper for them, another knock came at the door, more insistent this time. Opening it, she found Emmett Walsh and 4 other men standing there, their faces set in grim lines. Evening, Miss Sarah, Walsh said, his tone falsely polite. We've come to have a word with your Apache friend. Sarah stood firmly in the doorway. Mr. Walsh, this isn't a good time. The child is still recovering. This ain't about the child, Walsh replied, his voice hardening. It's about the killings down south. Apache killings. Running Wolf and his people had nothing to do with those raids, Sarah insisted. They've been peacefully camped north of here for months. So he says, Walsh sneered. Indians lie as easily as they breathe, Miss Sarah. Now step aside. I will not, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. This is my home, and you have no right to barge in here making accusations. Behind her, she heard Running Wolf rise to his feet. He moved to stand beside her in the doorway, his presence intimidating despite being outnumbered. If you have words for me, speak them, he said calmly to Walsh. But do not frighten my daughter, or disrespect this woman who has shown kindness to my people. Walsh's hand moved toward the gun at his hip. We don't want your kind around here, Chief. Those raids are just proof of what we already know. Apache can't be trusted. Mr. Walsh. Sheriff Davis's voice cut through the tension as he approached quickly from the direction of the town. What exactly do you think you're doing? What you should have done days ago, Walsh retorted. Getting this savage out of our town before we all end up scalped in our beds. The sheriff positioned himself between the two groups. There'll be no vigilante justice in Pinewood while I'm wearing this badge. Now all of you go home. Cool your heads. This isn't over, Walsh muttered as he and his companions reluctantly backed away. "You're making a mistake protecting him, Sheriff." After they had gone, Davis turned to Sarah and Running Wolf. "I can't guarantee I can stop them if they come back with more men," he warned. "Might be best if you were gone by morning," he added to Running Wolf. The Apache chief nodded gravely. "I understand. We will leave at first light." "But Little Fawn is still weak," Sarah protested. "The journey could cause her illness to return." Running Wolf placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You have done much for us, Sarah Matthews, but I will not bring danger to your door. My daughter is stronger now thanks to your medicine. We must return to our people." That night, as Little Fawn slept peacefully for the first time since her illness began, Sarah prepared medicines and instructions for Running Wolf to continue his daughter's treatment. She worked methodically, trying not to think about their departure, about the dangers they might face, about the unlikely friendship that had formed in these few short days. "You should sleep," Running Wolf said softly, watching her work. "The journey tomorrow will be long for you as well." Sarah looked up, startled. "For me? I'm not going with you." "You must," he replied simply. "Walsh and his men will not forget that you protected an Apache. They will make trouble for you here." Sarah hadn't considered this, but she realized he was right. By defying Walsh and the others, she had positioned herself as an Indian sympathizer, a dangerous stance in these troubled times. "Where would I go?" she asked, her mind racing. "I can't just leave everything behind." Running Wolf's expression was solemn. "My people would welcome the woman who saved their chief's daughter. You could teach our healers your medicine and learn ours in return. You would be honored among us." The offer stunned Sarah. To live among the Apache, it was unheard of for a white woman. Yet something in the idea called to her, awakened a longing for belonging that she had not felt since Thomas died. "I need to think," she said finally. "This is unexpected." Running Wolf nodded. "Sleep now. The rising sun will bring clarity." As Sarah lay in her bed that night, sleep eluded her. She thought of the life she had built in Pinewood, respected but solitary. And she thought of Running Wolf's offer, a new beginning, a chance to truly make a difference, to bridge two worlds that desperately needed understanding between them. By the time dawn streaked the sky with pink and gold, she had made her decision. The early morning light cast long shadows as Sarah secured the last bundle to her horse. She had packed only what was essential: her medicines and herbs, some clothing, a few precious books, and the silver locket containing a miniature portrait of her late husband. The rest of her possessions she had left in the cabin with a letter for Sheriff Davis, asking him to sell them and forward any money to her sister in Boston. Running Wolf and Little Fawn were already mounted, the child sitting in front of her father, wrapped in a blanket against the morning chill. The little girl looked much improved, though still pale and thin from her ordeal. "Are you certain of this path?" Running Wolf asked quietly as Sarah mounted her mare. She nodded, surprising herself with the calmness she felt. "Yes, there's nothing holding me here now." They rode out as the sun crested the eastern hills, taking a roundabout route to avoid being seen from town. Swift Arrow was waiting at the agreed meeting place, his face lighting up with joy at seeing his sister sitting upright and alert. "Little Fawn," he exclaimed, riding closer. "Your spirit is strong, little sister." The girl smiled weakly. "The white healer woman made me better, brother. She is coming to live with our people." Swift Arrow looked at Sarah in surprise, then at his father. Running Wolf nodded in confirmation. "Sarah Matthews has chosen to join our camp. Her medicine will benefit our people, and in return, we will give her protection and a new home." Swift Arrow studied Sarah for a long moment, then inclined his head respectfully. "Then she rides with us as one of our own." They traveled steadily throughout the day, keeping to less traveled paths and wooded areas where possible. Little Fawn dozed against her father's chest, while Sarah and the Apache men remained vigilant. By mid-afternoon, they began to climb into more rugged terrain, following game trails that wound through rocky outcroppings and dense pine forests. "We are close to our summer camp," Running Wolf explained as they paused to rest the horses. "It is hidden in a valley with a clear stream and good hunting." Sarah nodded, taking in the beauty of the landscape around them. The wilderness was both intimidating and exhilarating, so different from the settled town she had left behind. "Will your people accept me?" she asked suddenly, voicing the concern that had been growing as they neared the camp. Running Wolf considered her question. Some will welcome you immediately, especially those whose families you have helped before. Others may take time to trust. But you come under my protection, and as chief, my word is respected. An hour later, they crested a ridge and Sarah got her first view of the Apache camp nestled in a verdant valley below. Dozens of wickiups were arranged in a circular pattern, with horses grazing in a meadow nearby. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and she could see people moving about their daily tasks. As they descended into the valley, their approach was noticed. Children pointed and called out, and soon a group of Apache had gathered to meet them. Sarah felt her heart race as dozens of curious eyes turned to her. An elderly woman stepped forward, her face deeply lined but her eyes sharp. She spoke rapidly in Apache to Running Wolf, occasionally glancing at Sarah with undisguised suspicion. Running Wolf replied calmly, gesturing toward Little Fawn, who had perked up at the sight of her people. The old woman moved to the horse and reached up to touch the child's face, checking her temperature and examining her eyes. After a moment, she nodded and spoke again to Running Wolf. "Gray Dove welcomes you," Running Wolf translated for Sarah. "She is my sister and our camp's most skilled healer after Old Raven. She says Little Fawn's spirit has returned strongly to her body, thanks to your medicine." Sarah dismounted, approaching Gray Dove with respect. "I'm honored to meet you," she said, though she knew the woman couldn't understand her words. To her surprise, Gray Dove took her hands and examined them closely, turning them over and tracing the lines on her palms. The old woman said something that made several of the gathered Apache murmur in surprise. "What did she say?" Sarah asked Running Wolf. "She says your hands have healing in them, like her own. She wishes to learn your medicine, and to teach you ours." He looked slightly surprised. "It is a great honor. Gray Dove rarely takes anyone as a student." Over the next few weeks, Sarah settled into life among the Apache. She was given a small wickiup near Gray Dove's, and the two women, despite their language barrier, began to exchange knowledge of healing plants and treatments. Sarah learned to identify desert herbs she had never encountered before, while she shared her knowledge of treating various illnesses that had come with the white settlers. Little Fawn recovered fully, becoming Sarah's shadow around the camp. The child appointed herself as Sarah's interpreter, teaching her Apache words and explaining customs. Through her, Sarah began to understand the deep spiritual connection the Apache had with the natural world, how their medicine wasn't just about physical healing but about maintaining harmony between body, mind, and the world around them. Not everyone in the camp accepted Sarah's presence so readily. Some warriors, particularly those who had lost family to white settlers or soldiers, kept their distance, watching her with distrust. But Running Wolf's protection and Gray Dove's acceptance gradually opened doors. One evening, as Sarah sat outside her wickiup grinding herbs with a stone mortar Gray Dove had given her, Running Wolf approached and sat beside her. "Your hands work like Apache hands now," he observed, watching her technique. Sarah smiled. "Gray Dove is a patient teacher, even with our language difficulties. My people speak of you around the fires at night," Running Wolf said. "They say the white healer woman has an Apache heart in her chest." "Is that a good thing?" Sarah asked, pausing in her work. Running Wolf's usually solemn face relaxed into a rare smile. "It is the highest compliment they could give." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and reds. "I received news today," Running Wolf said finally. "A rider from the southern bands. The attacks on white settlements were done by young warriors from the Mimbreño band. Their leader has been disciplined by their chief." Sarah nodded. "I never believed it was your people. The problem is that the white military does not make such distinctions. They see all Apache as one." His expression grew troubled. "There is talk of soldiers moving into this region soon." "What will you do?" Sarah asked. "We will move our camp higher into the mountains before the first snow. It is safer there." He looked at her directly. "The journey will be difficult. If you wish to return to your people before winter, I would understand." The question caught Sarah by surprise. In the weeks she had been with the Apache, the thought of returning to white society had not crossed her mind. Here, despite the hardships of camp life, she had found purpose and belonging that had been missing in Pinewood. "These are my people now," she said simply. Where you go, I go. Something flickered in Running Wolf's eyes. Relief, perhaps, or something deeper. He reached out slowly and took her hand, a gesture that felt momentous in its simplicity. Then we face the seasons together, he said softly. 3 months later, as the first snow dusted the higher elevations, the Apache camp was securely established in their winter location, a sheltered canyon with natural hot springs that kept the worst of the cold at bay. Sarah's wickiup now stood close to Running Wolf's, a placement that acknowledged her growing importance to the chief and the tribe. In the large communal wickiup that served as a gathering place, a celebration was underway. Little Fawn, fully recovered and thriving, was performing her first ceremonial dance, a coming-of-age ritual that had been delayed by her illness. Sarah watched proudly as the little girl moved gracefully to the rhythm of drums and singing, her steps sure and strong. Grey Dove sat beside Sarah, nodding in approval. "She dances well," the old woman said in halting English, one of many exchanges between them as each learned the other's language. "Strong spirit." "Yes," Sarah agreed. "Very strong." Running Wolf approached and sat on Sarah's other side, his shoulder just touching hers, a subtle acknowledgement of their deepening relationship. "My daughter lives because of you," he said quietly. "My people are healthier because of your knowledge. And he paused, searching for words. "I have found a path I did not expect." Sarah smiled, feeling a contentment she had never imagined possible when she made her impulsive decision to leave Pinewood. Here, among people once considered enemies, she had found healing for her own heart and a new purpose for her skills. "Sometimes the greatest medicine comes from crossing the boundaries that separate us," she replied, watching Little Fawn complete her dance to appreciative calls from the gathered tribe. As winter settled over the mountains, Sarah Matthews, once an outsider, now embraced as part of the Apache family, looked toward the future with hope. The path ahead would not be easy, with tensions between whites and Apache continuing to grow, but she had found her place as a bridge between two worlds, and in that role, perhaps she could help heal more than just physical ailments. Running Wolf took her hand as they watched the celebration continue, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that needed no translation in any language. "Two paths becoming one," he said softly. "This is the strongest medicine of all."